Yasu, everybody.
Yes.
Just wanted to ask you, the dilemma for the couple this time out is that whether they decide to go back to the States or stay in France, or what they're going to do next. And I was wondering for all of you, has there ever been a situation in your own lives where you have to decide, maybe it's in LA versus New York or anything like that, or LA versus France or whatever, Paris? Has that ever been a situation you've had to deal with, and how do you deal with something that big?
Well, part of the idea of the movie is that it's very easy to look at a romantic relationship when there's an obvious bad guy. You know, one person is an alcoholic, or one person is abusive, but for what if you were to take two well-meaning people who actually love each other and want the best for each other? It's still hard. And could we paint that portrait? And I think anybody who's been in a long-term relationship, you run into, whether it feels as dramatic as Chicago and Paris, it's whether or not your lives are still growing on the same road, or does one need to change the road to keep growing?
That's what it's about. I mean, here there's no bad guy in particular, but they still have to make compromises, and they all feel like who's making the most compromise. You know, what compromise might jeopardize their relationship and their love. You know, it's all about like finding the right road, and the road is like, you know, it's like this small for it not to fall apart. You know what I mean? When you have a long-term relationship, it's always like, you know, you have to make choices and I mean, actually, their relationship starts with a choice that Jesse makes, which is to follow his heart. But that comes with consequences, and the film starts with the consequences of that choice, you know. And we find them in a situation where they have to make a choice again, which is like, you know, Jesse's putting in her face that, you know, he might want to move back to the States, but it might jeopardize their entire life. So, you know, that's the life of a relationship. I mean,
it's age appropriate for where they find themselves in life. You know, in the say the first movie, for instance, they're unattached. You see how easily they can get off a train and go home a day later, or just whatever. You know, you have that looseness, and we learned they both actually moved around a lot over the years, but when they were single and not attached. But now they're together. You see how difficult that is to maneuver through life with one other person and be on the exact same track. It's tough.
We will also take questions about your personal relationships. And advise you. Yeah, we're very good on sexual, politics, any issues. We may enjoy talking about them. So feel free to open your heart.
Well, I have no relationship question or need advice, unless you know what to do with 5 cats, you know.
That's my question.
Okay. But one of the interesting things with this trilogy of films, in particular here, are the long monologues and the dialogues. One of the opening scenes in the car, 14, 15 minutes. When you are constructing this, are you cognizant that this is going to be shot in one take, and then you're tossing in 2 children in the back as well? And what are the challenges that creating that particular kind of dialogue create for you as writers and performers, and you, Richard, as a director?
Yeah. Can I answer something before you say anything? Like, just mentioning that scene gives me like a flashback of anxiety again. I mean, like, my heart's like you know, like
I did
the
too.
beats are going slightly faster.
Glad you mentioned the children, because they're the unsung heroes of that scene. Because they're not asleep; they're acting. Those are 2 little girls, and I have twins, you know, roughly that age, and there's no way. I mean, just in the middle of that take, how did they not open their eyes and look at the camera? I mean, so many things could have gone wrong. I remember one way for it to go right.
There's the girls. There's it's a car driving on a road. I mean, it's like lights everywhere. We're acting with lines.
It was hot. I mean,
it was
incredibly
hot. No AC, of course, for the sound. I mean, like, it's a whole combination of things. Yeah. And then on top of it, we do have to act those 13, 14 minutes. And, you know, nothing in those scenes, I mean, are improvised. I just want to say right up front. And everything is scripted. And there's no way any other way, because since it is long takes, like, if you want to have this kind of arc development in the scene with this exact thing happening there, this exact thing happening there, and ending with that, this scene sets up the whole movie. You can't add one line. And basically it's such a challenge, I can't explain, just to tell you, it hurts my head just thinking about it. Maybe you keep on talking, just like I have a headache.
Important. I mean, I know what these guys can do as performers. We've worked together a lot over the years, so I wouldn't try that with most actors, but we've done it. I know they can do it, so it's a lot of hard work, but I know we'll get there. And it was just important, I think, at the very beginning of the film, I think for people who feel like they know Jesse and Celine to some degree, to just be dropped in with them, the reality of that lengthy take, and with no editing, no telling you who to look at, no emphasis, just the proscenium of, Jesse and Celine, that you could just feel like you're hanging out with them. I think the viewer has to accept that at some point, unconsciously, as reality, so I think we're, dropped into their reality and everything they're talking about. You're hanging out with Jesse and Celine. So that was just the vibe that the film kind of needed right off the bat. So
I think what Richard does in that scene to me, which I very much respect, is to actually do push us to get to that one take. What to me it does, and he does that in his films, and especially in those films, and it's like those long uncut scenes to me is really like, by not using that typical tricks of filmmaking, which is cut, close up, medium shot, you basically break kind of like the language of typical filmmaking, and in a way you kind of feel like you're witnessing something that is not a film, and it makes you feel very real. It's the goal that he wants to achieve, which I respect very, very much and admire. I don't mean to. I don't need to kiss his ass, and I've worked with him many times. So,
I need to kiss her ass. So. Constantly.
But it's true. I believe it's a very rare thing, and we're given that. It's hard work, but it's also a wonderful thing to be able to do as actors.
Laura, sorry. Hi guys, lovely to see you. I wanted to ask that one of my favourite things about these films is that they end leaving the audience to kind of think about and decide what will happen to them next. Will they meet up in a year's time? Will Jesse get on the plane? Where will they go from here? And I wondered if in the interim between making these films, you ever think about Jesse and Celine and what they might be doing or where they've got to in their lives, and also coming to the end of this film, where you think they'll go in the future. Have you thought about?
I remember once doing something ridiculous of being at a deli and trying to shop and buying some things and having a bunch of kids and with me and and trying to talk on the phone and doing much and having this thought I wonder if this happens to Jesse. Would this be a moment? And while nothing like that happened in the script, over the period of years you collect a few of those moments. There's a certain tone and a mood and theme to Before Sunrise and Before Sunset, and sometimes life pops up and it is that tone and mood, and it logs in there as something.
We have to think about their backstory every time we start to write one line on the screenplay. You can't start writing the second screenplay or the third screenplay even more without knowing everything about what happened in between. I wouldn't say they live, Celine lives with me 24/7, otherwise I'd be crazy. But, there's a bunch of people in my head.
She's just at home watching Before Sunrise and Sunset.
For 9 years. That's all I do. And
weeds growing out her hair.
No, truly we let go of them. But then when we get back into working on those films, it's like a tremendous amount of homework of figuring out what happened during those 9 years, basically. And you can't even write a line of screenplay on those films without having done that first. But we have the luxury of time, which is, that we have 9 years in between films.
Hey, Jerry.
Julie, why don't you know what you related to most about Celine and where she is now in her 40s and what aspects of the emotional story resonate to you the most?
Well, about Celine, I really wanted to make sure that she was a strong woman. She is a strong woman. She's looking towards the future. She's not someone who dwells in the past. And she's a very active person. She's not, and she could seem at times, she's very vindictive and she's not going to let someone tell her what to do or how it should be done. I mean, she also believes that if they do move to Chicago, it will destroy their relationship. It's not just about the work, and she's really convinced of that. And she probably, I mean, I personally think she's right. No, but I think she makes sense, And to me it was very important that she's not, she's not the wife of the writer. She's, you know what I mean? She's her own person. And that's very important for me to depict that character as so. And it is the same for Richard and Ethan, to make sure it's not this kind of like, the wife, because otherwise it's out of balance. Then it's not then it's a film about a guy who has a nice French wife, who takes, it was very important. And for those guys too, it's very important to make sure it is balanced, female, male, that it's not a macho movie or a feminist, movie without, meaning or anything, that it's like very, very balanced in that sense. And that's our goal, actually, to make sure when we write this that it is neither macho or feminist or men hating. She's not a man hating. A male, a what? A female. She doesn't hate men. She doesn't. You know what I mean? It's like that we find the right balance between the two.
If we were to revisit her in the 50s, where would she be?
In her 50s?
Yeah.
In 10 years from now? Well, we don't know yet. I don't know. I have no clue. We actually don't think about the future. That's how we kind of operate on those films.
We're so happy to be done with the third film.
Yeah, I know.
So much work.
We don't want to think of the fourth.
Hiatus.
Yeah. We might not even do a fourth. I mean, that could be it. It's not.
It's fine. If
it's
it
fine,
ends up a trilogy, we never planned it in the first place. I think we're fine with it, right?
Yeah.
As it is. But
We made 3. That's a lot.
It's impossible for us to know anything until some years go by.
Carlos.
Hi, over the span of 18 years, how have the characters and the story changed you guys as performers or actors? Since with Julie directing your own films and from the first one to the second one becoming writers, how has this changed you? And well, Richard as well.
Well, I like to say that I learned how to speak on camera on Before Sunrise. Like I'd never been, as a young actor, you kind of get asked to pose or affect an emotion but Richard wanted Julie and I to gap, to talk, and to be present in front of the camera, to not act. And this adventure in not acting,
It's hard.
started then. And it's just grown. Sorry.
No, but I was thinking about that because it's really hard, actually. You really rarely asked to do that as actors. Maybe once in a film to have a big monologue telling a story. You might have it once every 10 films, but usually it's like dialogue, like one word. But here it's like we have big chunks, like you should see the screenplay, it's like, and how do you do that without sounding, it can sound really boring if we're not super duper natural at saying it, like it sounds like we're really telling the story to someone we care for. So that's the real challenge of these films, and that's been the challenge as actors every time, and as writers, I mean, we worked on the screenplay of the first film, but it was really how to learn to really talk on camera without being boring, and that's the hardest thing. Like to tell a story on camera without sounding boring, it's the hardest thing. I mean, I've experienced it on other films, and it's really, really hard. So it's finding the right tone to do it. I don't know.
I don't know if we've evolved that much. I mean, I think the way we work on this film is very similar to the dynamic between us. We're a band who is still performing in a very similar manner. We're the Ramones or something.
The lyrics change.
Yeah, we were in the
things the same.
The way we sat in Vienna, 19 years ago almost, is the way we our inner dynamic, the way we push each other and pull out.
We're a little less impressed with one another.
Yeah. We're getting to know each other then, but the result is the same. The way we work together. So.
One of the many things I loved about the film is how raw emotionally you guys are, especially in the hotel sequence. Did you ever feel like you were going too far, or that you had to stop and cry it out in between takes? Because as an audience member, we're going, oh my God.
You talking about the hotel room scene in particular?
Yeah. Or any of this?
No, that was.
Richard was crying all the time.
Yeah, that was tough.
He was actually going, go, go, go.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah.
The trick is
Your question about did we ever go too far? Usually in the script phase, if we think we've gone too far, that's usually in a spot we should explore.
Yeah.
You know, because what people think is too far is usually not that far.
You know what's
You just
funny
stumble on
actually
something uncomfortable.
is to me is like when you do those scenes that are emotional and stuff. I mean, I feel actors. I mean, it's pleasurable for an actor, believe it or not, to cry, to suffer. It's a pleasant thing for an actor. That's what we train for. We train to do it. You know, when you see someone on camera crying and being hurt, they're actually enjoying it. So this is our training. But actually what's most painful is the simple things. That's the hardest thing to find as an actor. And believe it or not, the walk in that beautiful village that we were is actually more draining as an actor than it is, you know, I mean, obviously it is draining as an actor to do scenes where you're emotional and stuff, but there's a certain pleasure to it. I can't explain, or maybe I'm weird, I don't know. No, I think
exactly.
not,
I mean,
right? That's
It's
exactly.
funny too. It's not.
I mean, the fight
There's
is
a
funny, there's a
comedic
lot of
edge.
relief
Not that Jesse and Celine think it's funny,
Right.
but as writers, we know it's.
So it
There's
was.
a
What's
comedic
fun about it
element
is
to it.
it was challenging. We dove into it. We were locked in that room
days.
for a long time, and you came out with a scene. We also were very. The whole film had been building to that. We filmed that part of it in sequence, and so for us, yeah, was it challenging? Yeah, but we were so glad to be.
To be there and do it.
We had arrived where we had been worked for 9 years to get to. So.
Thank you.
Celia from Norway.
Celia.
Being in a creative relationship like this for so many years, what have you learned about yourself?
I've learned that I'm not as smart as Julie.
That's true.
We both learned that. We knew that right off the bat.
Is there anything that has surprised you?
But in our creative relationship, yeah, that's the
That's the
surprise.
biggest shock is that 18 years after Julie and I auditioned for Rick, for Before Sunrise, this little, romance, the idea that we would have this lifelong collaboration and that we would have poured so much of ourselves into it.
Unfathomable.
I mean, that's the thing that's a
It's
surprise.
very fulfilling.
The fact that we get to do this and that somebody's interested, I mean, that's a surprise.
I mean, what's a surprise to me is that we do this film, we really work hard in the writing, and we really work hard on everything, directing, acting and stuff. And then not everybody will like those films, but I mean, some people really like it. And it's a strange feeling because we're not trying to please anybody when we do the films. We're really just trying to be as true as possible. This is not like a publicity trick. We're just
You're trying
like.
to be funny. You're trying to entertain. You're trying to, trying to be dramatic. This is something else.
No, I mean, like this last film, especially writing it, I was like, oh my god, it's like I'm, like you go so deep into certain things in the writing and everything, and even emotionally. I mean, when I say, we're having fun doing the end scene, we're having fun, but it's also kind of like moving a lot of things within us. It's not as simple as like having fun. It's also complicated, those emotions and stuff, because we've all been through those emotions in a relationship, and it's not a fun thing to go through, so we know how heavy it is and stuff. So it's really, I don't know, it's just a very, we just try to be as genuine, as honest as possible. And what's amazing is that people relate, and in a way, sometimes I feel like, oh my god, no one's going to be interested in this and this and that. Sometimes you have doubts because you're like, sometimes it feels so like a deep emotion that people will be like, oh my god, I want to see happy people, kind of thing. But, in the end, some people can relate, which is, I guess, what cinema is about, for people to identify and, right? I don't know. Or dream. Maybe it's less dream and more identification.
Yeah, we have some ideal audience in mind, believe it or not. I mean, the second film we felt no one wanted. We made the first film and no one ever asked, oh, is there going to be another film? That wasn't a logical question. When we were making the second film in Paris, every day we looked at one another and just said, how are we getting to do this? This is amazing. We're getting to make this very personal film that no one really even cares about. Except 3 people. Which is, you're in a good spot if you can ever be making a film like that. And so the way that one ended, there has been this kind of buildup. We've all gotten questions over the last 9 years, like, oh, Jesse and Celine together. So we sort of stubbornly rebelled against that in our minds. But once we let that go and put out of our mind that there were even 3 people out there who cared about them, and just kind of dug into ourselves and concentrated on that. But we do have this very small audience in mind when we get to a crossroads and we think, oh, well, cinema, storytelling, narrative, language says if this plus this equals an unlikable character and you just don't do it. We think, well, that's a construct, that's not really real, it's the narrative, storytelling bubble that so much cinema exists in. We go, oh, maybe our audience, whoever that is, might appreciate that we go there on this subject, because we haven't built an artificial thing that can't support that.
If you look at the structure,
we can support a lot of brutal honesty, we hope, in what we've built.
The structure of before sunset or midnight, particularly, they'd be thrown out of any decent screenplay class in America. I mean, you just a 30-minute scene in one room, you can't do that. I mean,
it's a film within a film, the fight. So it's built like a film within a film.
But we think, oh, our audience might get that. They might think that was cool, I mean.
Or they could at least, make it through. It's a small audience sometimes.
Hi. Did any fan feedback from the first 2 films inform this one? Did any friends and family try to lobby you?
I was implying there that, yeah, we have gotten questions, but I don't know if it informed.
No, we tried
we
to
really
keep
put
it
that in.
to
The big
ourselves.
thing that's informed by fans, there's a moment in the hotel when
Our little homage.
the woman who works at the hotel asks me to sign the 2 books and talks about how important they are. It's a slight homage of us putting the fans in the movie, I mean, this is something about Sunrise and Sunset spoke to people, not, the people that it reached, it spoke to them, and so there's a little homage to that there.
Yeah, I know a lot of people come up to me and say, "Oh, I fell in love with my boyfriend watching the film," or, we reconnected after 5 years because I saw Before Sunset, and he decided to call me after he saw the film. So we are responsible for a few children. That's what
A few marriages, a few children.
A few marriages,
yeah,
a few
got a lot of
kids
that.
are, I feel like their godmother. No.
So I also really loved the dinner table scene. So I'm curious how that rehearsal process was different, given that you didn't know those cast members obviously as well as you know each other, but it was still as intimate to me.
Yeah, well, we felt that was necessary, for the movie to see their social selves, to see them interact with other people. The previous 2 films were these kind of, bubbles into themselves. So that was purposefully, designed for the movie, and the subject of that is kind of romance at different ages, or does it endure? So that's kind of what that scene's about. But it was really fun for us to pull in other people into. And dinner scenes are tough. They're often boring. They're hard to shoot. Everything about a dinner scene is challenging, and it was fun to bring that really wonderful group of people in and into our process. Every one of them is very unique. Actually, one of them I've known longer than Julie and Ethan, the woman who's roughly their age in that couple. She's a filmmaker and ended up one of our co-producers. She's a Greek filmmaker who's very acclaimed right now.
Yeah, I have to admit I have not seen the first 2 films, even though I'm of the age group that you guys are basically appealing to. And I purposely didn't see them before I went to the screening to see if I could get this film, and I did, very, very much. So I wanted to know that while you're making this film, do you guys think about that at all? That, hey, there's a whole bunch of audience out there who has no idea. Do you purposely think, how can we draw them in? Which, by the way, you did. I was in step with you guys from the very beginning. And the second point is, are you concerned at all about being just specifically for a certain age group? In the screening that I was at, there were some 20-year-old girls who kept gasping every time Julie opened her mouth. And I thought, do they think she's an absolute bitch, or do they not get her? And I got her. You know, and then that made me think, am I an absolute bitch?
I think they're thrilled by it, probably, just someone who can express themselves like that. But no, I mean, I think this film is designed to stand on its own. I think it's a bonus if you've seen the first two, but absolutely not necessary. As was the second. I mean, we had some flashbacks there because we really thought it needed it. This one, it sort of answers any questions we hope that you might have had coming out of the last film, but it tries to, and this was delicate in the writing, it has to feel very, not exposition, but it had to feel intertwined into this subject matter. You know, that we would answer any questions or refer to that just enough, but not have it be, you know, what this film was about necessarily. So.
But I'm glad that you feel that way. We really don't know yet. Not enough people have seen the movie to know to what extent that worked. But that's, you know, those great John Updike books, the Rabbit books. Each one, you can read it on its own. It's better if you read them together. But that's the hope, is that these three, each one should stand on its own.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I was kind of same age range, and growing up with kind of went through kind of similar life experience. My question is the location. I know you guys kind of little bit script before you went to the Greece, but how much the locations interacting with local people affect you guys, the dialogue with this film?
It ends up being very impactful to the story. It's a major character. It's the third lead character in the movie, and it has been for all of them. But it comes pretty late in our process. We really just think about the character and their relationship, and then the location for this one in particular came pretty late. But then once we're there, we did most of our writing in Greece. We visited locations. We met people, the actors that we were going to be working with, and it infused itself into everything about the movie. So, but it.
I mean, I would make reference to Medea or all those.
All that.
I mean,
Bubbled
because
up
we're
out
there.
of
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of one of the joys of doing this, is we really get to know a place. Yeah, and incorporate all that. And even the Greek political situation at the moment, we didn't want to be that film that tells Greece anything about itself, but, we did capture a moment, a little bit via Celine's paranoia about the situation there, thinking a revolution's imminent,
Sorry, no, I mean, it's not funny, it's serious, it could be,
It's in the air.
Hi, I just wanted to go back in time to before sunrise. When we were casting the roles, what made you cast Ethan and Julie in the roles of Jesse and Celine? And what, for Ethan and Julie, what made you to see yourselves in these roles that you wanted to audition for them?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's our origin story, I guess, for all of us. It was conventional. There was a script, and I was going through a casting process. I remember I met Julie very early. She was like the second actor I met on the film in Los Angeles. And Ethan I saw in a play in New York, Jonathan Mark Sherman's Sophistry. And we talked after, and we got there. But I met a lot of actors, and the bar for what I was looking for was so high, because I knew what they would have to do to make this film work. So I was looking for the two most creative, inspiring people I could find. I didn't know how to pull it off. So it was getting two actors who were, up for that challenge to try to make this film work. So that was a very, once we had other actors, I remember seeing how they looked together. I remember just seeing. We had other actors who were kind of mixing and matching and doing scenes, working together a little bit. I remember seeing.
Yeah, audition with another guy,
Yeah.
and you audition with another girl.
Mm-hmm.
How is it, by the way? I never asked you.
Sometimes on my darkest days, I think about
I never asked you that.
Yeah, it's almost like that never happened, but yeah, it did. It was a casting thing.
The funny, it's
Would you have liked her better?
That's a trick question. There's a funny thing though that I just remembered, is that there was a day early, mid in the development of Before Sunrise, where Rick told us that, you know, we would get to choose our character's name. He said our creation myth. It was such a, I've never done that. Now it's been this long thing of like, well, what should the character be named?
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's a funny ownership you get to have of your own character when you, and I, now having more experience in film now, I can't believe that Rick asked us to be a part of that. These two young people, to me, to ask us to. It's such a dangerous thing to do. I mean, it's such a difficult thing to do.
I mean, if we had
Thank
terrible,
God he had us.
bad ideas, it would, what would you have done if we had come up with terrible dialogue?
There were a lot of those.
Can I just ask a follow-up question?
Many of those conversations, especially within the argument, are really familiar to anyone who's in a long-term relationship. But what do you two learn as Celine and Jesse, as you're acting it, about how to handle conflict? Because I assume when you're going through a familiar fight as a character, you have more time to sort of process what you're saying.
It's so nice to be able to have time to come up with the right
way.
response.
I mean, it's like, this is the ideal argument. I mean, you know, we get to write it for like 8 weeks, you know, we get to revisit it, rehearse it, you know.
Yeah, all those things you wish you would say, all that, very cathartic, actually.
Yeah, in real life, I don't know, I don't think I'm that good. Like, I never come up with the right, you know. And I never, I'm like, you know, I scream and I throw things around. No, I'm joking. No, actually, I don't argue very much. So, you know, it was a real stretch for me to write that scene.
Yeah, Julie's so non-combative. It's a real stretch for her to have conflict anywhere in her life.
This is a question for all three of you, please. I'm wondering what relationship wisdom or advice we could give to or take from Jesse and Celine.
Ethan is the specialist.
None. You know, with none. I mean, that's the fun of this is you're just seeing the warts and all. You know, I mean, that's all we can do, or all that we've tried to do is try to put three-dimensional real human beings on screen and put them in a relationship with each other and watch them age 20 years. You know, I mean, that's what, and you can take from that whatever you can. Oh, you know, he was a prick when he said that. He should, like, that's the dream. We don't have any advice about it. All we're doing is trying to play out some reality. And the hope is by doing that, somebody else can use their wisdom and enjoy it. I don't know, you know, make sense out of it.
I mean, we don't have any advice.
Dr. Phil will be here later. And
with zero. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. Relationships is so complex. It's so in relation to who you are. It's so specific. It's so impossible to even. I mean, you know, we explore one kind of relationship with two kind of people, and you know, and that's it. And there's a million different things that you know are common to. I mean, like it's impossible. It's endless. In a way, it is amazing because I think human beings have endless things to tell because there's endless complexity to each of us and individuals.
And that's what was cool about the location of Greece. Talk about, and you know, Greece is this place where love stories, romantic. I mean, they've been told for thousands of years, and they always feel new.
God's
that's the weird thing about
humans.
God's having sex with
mostly.
Yeah.
I think if there's anything hopeful, it's really you see a couple working through. I've talked to a lot of people now who are older and they find the movie. I think that's what charged them up about the movie and made them feel good, is to see these two people who are still trying. You know, they're still communicating. They're making each other laugh when they can, and you see them in the ring. You know, together. I think often in relationships, one or both have kind of checked out. If you've got problems, I'll deal with it as minimal as I can and then go back. You know, you see a split there. So I think it's hopeful. And it's a good depiction of two people who are actively working through. They care enough that they're still working through. So.
You know, and I think for my character, you know, I really wanted to make her really a fighter because I felt that, you know, so many people in a relationship kind of give up, and then they build more resentment that if they were fighting it at the moment, they should be fighting it. And I think that's what destroys relationship, actually, is when, you know, when the woman or the man will say, okay, fine, let's do it like that. And then they're never happy You know, and I think that's the end of a relationship, is when someone gives up the fight that they really believe is what makes them happy, makes the relationship works, etc., etc. And you know, the 20-year-old that was gasping every time I opened my mouth, she doesn't know yet that's the secret of making a relationship work, you know, because she doesn't know yet, but, which is fine. Or maybe she knows and she thinks it's another, I don't know. You know what, the truth is there's no rules of how to make a relationship work. And I don't even know how to do it, so, you know, I'll stop talking. Yeah.
Next question.
Next question.
I actually have a follow-up to my previous question. Richard, maybe at one point you were afraid that maybe the movie will be blow up by the clash of egos of this, you know, hot and up-and-coming actor after Dazed and Confused, and then the French passionate actress, or did it actually work good for the movie, that they were these two passionate people?
Yeah, passion with artists enough to put ego aside. You know, we all have egos, I mean, but you realize it's kind of like being on a team. Where do you fit in? What's your role? And, you know, what's going to make the best movie? So we've always had this wonderful process, and it's hard to define. But yeah,
I mean, it almost started there.
We clicked. You know, there wasn't that ego friction that some people have innately and some don't have. We didn't have it, so we've always been able to bring really strong points of view and a lot of confidence in ourselves to a collaborative effort, and it's worked really friction-free for the most part as far as our process goes. So. It's kind of, I think that's why the band's still together, you know.
I just wanted to ask about Celine, because we were talking about this before we started out. Celine's probably one of the most honest women in terms of truthfulness that we've seen in cinema, that she's so real in terms of how she's developed and aged and grown, and now the kind of conflicts she has as a woman of her age. And I was wondering if you'd ever reflected on that actually there aren't many women like Celine in cinema in terms of the level of truthfulness there is in her.
Well, there is. I mean, it's always been my issue since I'm very young. I've seen movies and stuff, and I see of obviously complex women. But I remember as a kid growing up and be like, okay, I see complex women in like Bergman films. I see in some plays like Edda Gabler, or like, you know, there's very few. Like usually it's like one dimension, if any. You know, 2 dimension is like a miracle, and like it's really hard to find characters that are written in a way that is truthful, multidimensional. I mean, she's not good, she's not bad, she can be a bitch, she can be adorable, you know, like how do you build that? And you have that in male character a lot. You have like extremely complex, extremely conflicted characters and stuff, and I felt, you know, I mean, there's been characters like that too a lot in like, for example, the cinema in the 70s in the US was wonderful, in the 60s and stuff, that was wonderful. Then it kind of died in the 80s, like the woman became one-dimensional again, something happened, I don't know what it is, but anyway, I just wanted to, you know, for me it's essential, and it's for us too, because we really work together. It's not me writing just Celine, you know, and, you know, I write tons of lines for Jesse, but, you know, and we all write for each other, so, I mean, we don't write for him because he's not in the film, but we would otherwise. But you know, basically to make sure the character is really multidimensional and really real, and not some kind of cut out, you know, cardboard of like a fantasy or something like that. I would never let that happen anyway, with me in that room, and they wouldn't let me do that anyway, so.
Yeah, a lot of this is, you know, Ethan has a strong, and I think I do too, these films are so balanced, like we really put our feminine side forward, Julie puts her masculine side forward, and I don't think we've ever been, you know, out, I don't know, I don't think any of us have ever felt like it was stacked against us. I think we are all supporting, you know, each of these characters in who they are and what they're trying to do.
Okay, one last question. Ethan, you said that you and Julie chose your characters' names. I was wondering how you chose Jesse and Celine. What made you choose those names?
Do you remember?
No, yeah, I don't know really, but I knew I had a friend named Celine.
Yeah, the writer. The Rivette film, you know.
Rivette,
it sounds good.
Celine
Jesse and Celine.
Jesse and Celine sounds good,
I
right?
worked on it for a while because it didn't matter how
You
they
like
sounded
Jesse
together.
James?
No, remember that was your joke. Did you cut that out? Is that still in the first movie? Yeah, Jesse James.
But he says Jesse, but people call you James. Jesse.
Yeah, my name is James. We're going. Yeah, it's whatever. Jesse James? No. I think for me it was just a name I always wanted. Just when I was a kid, Ethan was to me it sounded like a name of a candy bar or something. I didn't know what it was. I wanted to have a more normal name.
Yeah, and Celine, I think of if I was raised by parents that were a little more, like less hippie-ish, because Julie is actually super hippie, because I was born at the end of 69, like if you're called Julie and you're born before 84, like you have parents that are hippies.
Yeah.
So Julie in France, and my parents call me Julie because of Julie Christie, and also Miss Julie, which is really dark because she kills herself. But so Celine, I thought, was more like, she's a more conventional, more, straight version of, I'm a little crazier than her, so like a more straight, I probably would have been named Celine if my parents were a little, kind of parallel, more normal parents. Ooh, that word exploded. I can't say that word. It explodes when I say it. Normal.
The Julie hippie thing was, so it was Julie Christie, you said, or why were hippies?
Julie Christie and Miss Julie, yeah, that's yeah. Like, my dad was in love with Julie Christie when he grew up.
Who could blame him?
Thank you guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Good talking to you guys.